Okay, so because the next thing again about the post-classical era is that there's powerful these trade networks that are already in existence kind of flourish and get bigger and more intensified. All right, so that's the major term. This is major economic change, which is just not a complete change either. It's kind of in a way you could say it's continuity that these trade networks are now continuing to exist, but they just get bigger and more intense. And so trade networks are intensifying, and particularly like in the Indian Ocean and in West Africa, there are major cities uh, that grow. I mentioned a couple before, but remember I mentioned Srivijaya near Malacca and Mogadishu is also Mombasa, Baghdad, Calicut, Hangzhou, Venice, but also Timbuktu is really worthwhile noting. Again, Timbuktu is a major center of art, education, literacy, monotheistic religion with Islam, great trading center, book trade, judges, doctors, lawyers, or not doctors, not lawyers, but judges and doctors and nobles and scholars all travel here. Mansa Musa is the king here. Timbuktu is part of the Mali Empire, uh, governed by Mansa Musa. Uh, Great control of the gold and salt trade on the Trans-Saharan Trade Network. Don't forget about Ghana and Songhai are the two West African kingdoms here in this post-classical era. This is really when West Africa is at its height of its civilization as a post-classical era. At the same time, majority of this, remember, majority of this post-classical era, Europe is in the Dark Ages, Western Europe anyway. But Africa is at its height of its civilization. Wealthy, monotheistic, um, centralized government, strong rules and laws, scholarly, very much involved in trade. All the characteristics of like a great civilization are embodied by Africa at this point, and West African kingdoms. The Indian Ocean also, is where you see a lot of these trading cities. I kind of mentioned that before, um, but that is also happening in the post-classical era. All right, so these trade networks just get bigger and they expand, really, and intensify, and cities on those trade networks grow. All right, so also, don't forget, again, in the Americas, similar things are happening, trade networks expanding. In the Americas, always remember trade is not trans-regional like you see it here in the Eastern Hemisphere. In the Americas, trade is regional, kind of local, and like river-based, not like sea-based here. Um, When trade is on water, it's river-based. Here you have sea-based trade or ocean-based trade with the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean. Here you have like rivers, local trade. That's mostly because of the north-south alignment of the Americas as opposed to the east-west alignment of the Eastern Hemisphere. There's just no way to connect peoples in South America with peoples in North America. There's not that, enough sea-going technology or ocean technology that can, say, have an Inca person travel to meet Native Americans in the Americas. But trade network is intensifying here. Okay. Um, and I guess what differentiates the trade networks of the post classical era from the classical era is that there's more like new powerful trading cities that develop, even in other parts of the Eastern Hemisphere, not along the Indian Ocean trade network or the Trans-Saharan trade network, but even in Europe, Venice and Northern Europe here, and also in the Americas. All right, so trading cities, a big part of the post-classical era. Um, I don't want to forget about religions here, but it's not one of the major concepts of the post-classical era, but it's still obviously significant. So you see continuities in terms of religions that are powerful. Christianity spreading because of these trade networks. Christianity spreading farther now into Europe. Hinduism, Buddhism spreading more into Southeast Asia and in China, especially with Buddhism in China. Confucianism is still rooted in China. Taoism is somewhat practiced in Japan and rural parts of China. There's now religious syncretism. Remember, religious syncretism is the combination and blending of elements of different religions. That's happening in China with Neo-Confucianism, blending of Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. Judaism, and then, of course, Islam in the Middle East has risen now to prominence. So that's another marker of, you could almost say trade networks too, is that because trade is so influential in spreading religion, that's a new religion that's spread is Islam. And it's changed the post-classical era big time with the rise of these empires, the Islamic empires. Okay. Other major theme of the post-classical era is this explosion of technology. All right, so here's just some examples. But what I want to illustrate here is that technology and the explosion of it has social consequences. All right, this is a major differentiating point from the classical era. In the post-classical era, this technology explodes and has consequences for people. So it's not all bad, but there's this. So, for example, some technology you should know about: Chinampa field systems, the floating gardens of the Aztec in the Americas, right? You've got the horse collar. There's other there's monsoon wind knowledge. There's sails, lateen sails, caravel ships, the astrolabe, compass, bigger and better ships out there in the Indian Ocean Trade Network, especially. There's Chinese junk ships. Chinese also have flying cash now, they call it, which is a form of credit. These ships that the merchants on those ships can use to trade with people they go encounter. The Chinese Navy here has been commissioned by Zhang He, and the Chinese dynasties are kind of all over the Indian Ocean, but due to better ships, right? So there's just a lot of better technology. There's the horse collar, which helps harness the power of animals. More wheeled vehicles, better plows, iron weapons and things like that, and iron tools, and metallurgy is increasing. All these things are happening here, okay, with terms of technology, but there is consequences for that. So some of it is good, right? Like farming technology, these new, better farms, like floating gardens, terrace farmings in the Americas, like that's due to like technological innovation, right? So those are good things. But there's other things. So you see new forms of coerced labor and arising in the world. So there's serfdom now with feudalism in Europe and Japan. You're seeing peasants have to do more work. So they have better agricultural tools. Therefore, there's more work for peasants to do on the manor or fief that serfs work on under a feudal system. All right, since there's a horse collar, there's more animal work, or there's more jobs relating to using animals to do agricultural work. So more technology equals more work to be done, but who's doing that work is lower peasant, lower class people, or like it's government imposed labor. such as the Mita system in the Inca Empire, where they basically people are forced to do government service for about a month out of every year. You see a rise in social hierarchies with the feudal system, especially. There's intensification of class and caste. That is a continuity throughout South Asia with the caste system. There's more classes of people in every society. There's merchants, there's craftsmen, there's traders, there's priests, there's government officials, there's agricultural workers, peasants. Like there's all sorts of new social classes of people, and every empire seems to have a different social class system. All right, so like for example, merchants are way more valued in the Middle East than they are in China. Right, priests are the top social hierarchies in India, whereas they may be, in the middle in Western Europe. It's all over the place. It's changing constantly. So there's also another form of labor organization called a guild organization, which is known as the Hanseatic League. This is an association of craftsmen in Western Europe who kind of come together to set prices and to determine who gets to kind of service what territory. So it's kind of like people working together to kind of make sure everyone can have a fair kind of shake at making a profit. But that's called the Hanseatic League. It's kind of done in everyone's kind of best interest. Okay, so patriarchy again with this is intensified, right? There are some exceptions, like there's some participation. Some women do have some participation opportunities in the Mongol Empire, and in Japan there's some like advisory roles for women or like religious roles for women as well. But technology leads to more. The big point here is that technology leads to more forms of control over people and new forms of labor, and a lot of it is coerced labor. So there's more tools, more work to be done, and that work falls on the peasant and lower class. All right, just a couple other things I just want to remind you of that happened in the post-classical era. Okay, first is the Crusades. This is a big religious conflict between the Muslims of the Islamic empires who are like pushing their way into Europe and have eventually conquered the Byzantine Empire. And so that sets the Pope of the Catholic Church kind of an alarm, and he declares crusades against the Muslims to take back their Holy Land. And so that starts like a 300-year war really between the Muslims and the Christians, led by Pope Urban II. Popular Muslim leader is Saladin. The Muslims really are the ones who kind of come out on top. The Islamic Empire is going to control the Holy Land for a long time. Although they are fairly tolerant of Christians and other Jewish people who live in their empire, if they don't convert to Islam, they just have to pay the jizya, the Jizya, jizya or tax, if they choose not to adopt Islam. But what's important about the Crusades is that it actually helps bring Western Europe out of the Dark Ages. So the Western European knights and the Pope's armies actually don't beat the Muslims for any really great length of time. What they're actually though exposed to is like science and technology and medicine and other goods that are from Asia that they've never seen before. And so it helps bring them out of the Dark Ages, and Western Europeans actually try to expand. They begin to like want to explore the world. Okay, and that kind of is the impetus for what happens in the next era when they actually expand overseas. Okay, so I'm going to say a little bit more on the next. There'll be a little more short video in a second, but right now I just want you to tell me, or talk to yourself, what are the major characteristics of the post-classical era? How is it actually different from the classical era?